Although most passengers would now arrive to Istanbul through one of two large passenger airports, the original airport to the west of the city is still in service today. From the Ataturk airport, the majority of departures are large cargo aircraft, though nearby to this is a treasure trove of Turkish aviation history. There are not many air museums located in Turkey. However, this one, which is situated just outside the old Istanbul airport, more than makes up for that, as they have at least one example of pretty much everything the Turkish Air Force has ever flown. From the fast jets that served the Turkish Air Force throughout the Cold War period, to some larger transport aircraft, let's take a look at what this museum holds. Reaching the Air Museum from the city centre could not be much easier thanks to the Marmara train line, which runs along the south of the Golden Horn and across the Bosphorus into the Asian side of Istanbul. Opened in 2013, it is an efficient and direct way of reaching the museum. If you are departing from the station near the Eminönü harbour, take the train heading towards Halkali and disembark at the Yeşilyurt station. There is a large sign outside proclaiming that this is the Air Museum, and curiously enough, almost none of the aircraft depicted are actually within the museum. The hangar behind me holds a lot of the oldest aircraft that this Air Museum has. However, unfortunately today it is closed for renovations, but there's more than enough still to see to make this a very worthwhile trip. First opened in 1985, the Air Museum aimed to preserve important aircraft that had served the Turkish Air Force, as well as providing a history into the endeavours of flight within the country. Aside from a brightly painted Dornier 28 gate guard, the first aircraft that really captures the attention is a Lockheed F-104 Starfighter, displayed on a plinth in a very dramatic pose. This one looks to be an ex-Luftwaffe aircraft that was acquired by Turkey and is painted in a grey and green splinter camouflage. One more F-104 Starfighter is held at the museum, this one sporting a smart Southeast Asian starred camouflage scheme. Up next are two examples of aircraft that are still in active service with the Turkish Air Force, these being the General Dynamics F-16 Fighting Falcon and the Northrop F-5 Freedom Fighter. The F-16 is Turkey's principal fighter, and will most likely continue to be so for quite a while to come, as the country is no longer receiving the Lockheed F-35 Lightning II, and the only other existing aircraft that is on the cards to replace it is Russia's Sukhoi Su-57. At the time of making this video though, it is not a great time to be arranging deals or procuring hardware like that. Another active aircraft is the Northrop F-5 Freedom Fighter, and two of these are held at the museum. One is painted in the colours of Turkey's aerobatic display team known as the Turkish Stars, and the other is in a tactical grey camouflage scheme. The majority of the fighter aircraft at the museum are located on several lines, so it feels like you're walking along the flight strip of an airbase. This part of the Air Museum was my favourite, as you can walk up and down the rows of American-made jet aircraft of the 1950s and 1960s. It is made to feel just like you're at an air show dedicated to the Turkish Air Force. The collection policy of the museum extends well beyond acquiring just one example of each aircraft, as there are no fewer than 3 examples of the Republic F-84 series, and 2 North American F-100 Super Sabres. Of the Republic F-84 aircraft on display, there are 2 of the reconnaissance RF-84F Thunder Flashes and 1 F-84F Thunderstreak, all of which are in natural metal and have the unusual square-shaped markings that were originally used by the Turkish Air Force. Another similar first-generation fighter of the early 1950s is the North American F-86 Sabre, complete in markings of the short-lived Flying Swans aerobatic team. One of the rarest aircraft here at the museum, or at least outside the US anyway, is an example of the Convair F-102 Delta Dagger. I've not seen one of these before. Out of all NATO nations that could have done with a state-of-the-art interceptor during the Cold War, I always thought it was a bit unusual that the only European countries this mighty piece of kit was exported to was Greece and Turkey. An aircraft that is becoming increasingly rarer to see in the skies of the 21st century is the McDonnell Douglas F-4 Phantom, and although there are several examples present at the museum, the Turkish Air Force still flies these. The museum has not 1, but 2 McDonnell Douglas Phantoms. Alright, 2.5 then. One is the E variant designed for strike and interception missions, and the other is a reconnaissance variant with a nose full of cameras. The final aircraft that make up the first few lines on display are beginner and intermediate trainer aircraft, including the Lockheed T-33 Shooting Star, 2 very colourful Beech T-34 Mentors, and a Cessna T-37, adorably known as a Tweet. On passing the neat first couple rows of fast jets at the museum, the remaining displays are a large mix of all kinds of other aircraft the Turkish Air Force used, ranging from small army spotter and liaison aircraft to some of the largest transport aircraft the Air Force used. But first, another American-built rarity caught my eye, and this was the Grumman S-2 Tracker. Usually serving as a carrier-borne maritime anti-submarine hunter aircraft, the Turkish Navy is one of few operators outside of the US Navy that used this aircraft. And just opposite the Tracker was one of my favourite aircraft. The museum has not 1 but 2 examples of the Douglas C-47 Skytrain. The one behind me is painted in a transport scheme, and the other one is painted in Southeast Asian camouflage. The other Douglas C-47 sits at the opposite side of the museum by the hangar. Looks like it needs a bit of a repaint though, as there's quite a lot of paint chipping going on here. Another Douglas transport aircraft operated by the Turkish Air Force was the Douglas DC-4, and even though they only ever had 3 to start off with, the museum has 1 example preserved, so well done on keeping 33% of the original fleet, Turkey. A much more recent transport aircraft is the C-160 Transall, originally sold to Turkey in the 1970s, with some examples still going strong in the current Air Force. Whilst walking around this large grey transporting machine, the sound of a much larger aircraft could be heard in the distance, and this was actually from an Airbus A400, bought by Turkey as a replacement of the Transall in the heavy transport role. Two more particularly large aircraft are held at the museum, and whereas the vast majority of aircraft displayed here are of American origin, one of these was French built and the other British. Looking a bit out of place as a civilian airliner in a military air museum is a Caravelle in Istanbul Airlines livery. On the opposite side is a very successful British airliner from around the same period, known as the Vickers Viscount. Whereas a lot of British airliner designs of the immediate post-war period didn't really go anywhere, the Viscount found itself being bought by a large range of international airlines and air forces, with this example complete in Turkish Air Force markings. This area of the Air Museum does seem to be a lot more sparse than the rest of it for some reason. Maybe that's just an excuse to put some more aircraft here in the museum later. Other aircraft that are given a lot of room over in this corner is a Sikorsky H-19 Chickasaw helicopter and the Beech AT-11 Kansan, both of them quite unusual things to see in an air museum. The H-19 Chickasaw is one of few helicopters the museum has on display, and through a small open window, a view of the insides of the cabin can be seen. From this corner of the museum, you might be able to see that there are a few other aircraft hiding on the other side of the fence. With this tour of the outside exhibits nearly complete, the last few aircraft tucked away behind the Caravelle are some small liaison aircraft. Painted in a dark green colour scheme, they consist of American and German light aircraft, the largest of these being two more examples of the Dornier 28 Sky Servant. The windows of these aircraft could do with a bit of a clean, but you can get close enough to take a look inside the cockpit. There are even some non-flying pieces of equipment here in the form of several artillery pieces and ground vehicles, plus two formidable looking missile launchers, displayed as if to form an arched entrance within the museum. It was a shame the hangar itself was not open on the day of my visit, but I did get free entry due to it being a public holiday, and there was more than enough to spend several hours outside of the Air Museum. If you have enjoyed this video on the Istanbul Air Museum, why not leave a like and follow my channel for more, and I'll have many other videos from air museums around the world, as well as other historical places of interest. However, until next time, see you around.